Alright, what's going on, guys? It is your boy TKD Wednesday. You're back here on PlayStation Source, and I know yesterday we just did another PS5 video that went up yesterday. Make sure to go check out that if you haven't. But we did get some new sprinkles here to the mix that do involve PS5, and some interesting quotes as well from a former PlayStation executive that I just want to bring to the table and kind of just relay to you all. You know what I'm saying? But TLDR, PS5 is coming soon, and it's being brought in a different form. But if you want to hear more about that, let's get right into the video. And so what went down was that there was a Sony strategy meeting that was going on, and they were talking about PS5 in a particular manner. So I would like to just read here the quote that was said during said meeting. They said here that, quote, "We plan to introduce a compelling lineup for PS5 soon." Now, we could talk about the intricacies and the notions of what does soon mean, right? But I think Jeff Grubb, which Jeff Grubb, we did talk about him a lot on yesterday's video. Make sure to go check that out as well. But he did have a compelling theory on Twitter. He said that, hey, soon rhymes with June. I mean, soon does rhyme with June. Soon does rhyme with June. But definitely, like I've said, I'm definitely more sold on the prospect of there being a June event, especially, with the what we've heard from Jason Schreier on Press Start Podcast, as well as Jeff Grubb, what he's been saying on Twitter. So I feel like there's definitely a potential, to have a PlayStation June event, right? But then it comes to term of like, are we talking about hardware in June? Are we talking about games in June? Can you talk about games without revealing the hardware? All that good stuff, which I did express my full thoughts in yesterday's video. But overall, like, especially from him saying that, hey, we are getting a compelling games lineup here pretty soon, I do think that they may be revealed in tandem, like, or maybe there's a dedicated games lineup later on, as opposed to just having some of the games for the reveal event and different stuff like that. So I think that there's gonna be probably like a mix of the two, and I feel like that's more compelling and more likely based off what he has said here. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you buy it? Do you think that there will be some sort of compelling reveal and compelling games and different stuff like that on an upcoming event? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Now, of course, let's just lay it out there, right? The big elephant in the room that is affecting all of our lives here. Of course, the world is very different right now, right? Like, we have this crazy pandemic, and we as fans and as consumers and all that good stuff, like, we have all been affected as well as the companies themselves, right? Because if you think back to February 2013, February 20th, 2013, a young Kev was watching live when they unveiled the PlayStation 4, right? And they were showing Knack, they were showing Killzone Shadowfall, and of course they showed off that glorious DualShock 4 that we all use today, right? So obviously that is very much different than what we have now with PS5, us being into the end of May, and that is about, if we're going off of when the PS4 was launched, which was in November, right? We are pretty much 6 months out from the PS5 reveal, and we don't have any first-party games that have been officially announced for the console. We also don't have the hardware reveal as well, right? We do have the controller, shout out to the DualSense, but things are definitely a lot different than last gen, right? And we had an interesting person come on and actually say some quotes about that change, and his name, you guys maybe are familiar with him, Adam Boyes. He was the former PlayStation VP of third-party relations, and he had some interesting things to say in spite of one of his greatest moments, which I'll play right here.
This is how you share your games on PS4.
Thanks.
PlayStation.
We all love that moment from 2013, but here's what he said about this whole difference in like how they're rolling out information. They say here, quote, "From a public-facing perspective, I have heard less about the content. Then you just juxtapose that with Microsoft Xbox's Series X content debut, which didn't have first-party content. I feel like it's really hard to get context for what you're trying to convey. Like Mark Cerny's talk, which I thought was fascinating, and our dev teams were super over the moon, but it was very much a GDC talk. Whereas a lot of fans fans were like, show me the screenshots, right? Then he goes on to say, I think we were used to copying and pasting previous approaches, but I feel right now that I'd rather see stuff come closer to the actual launch. I think too many people still see it as the battle of the console wars, when I'm like, I think they're doing something different, obviously, a different approach than before, but also the world is in a very different place. We're all at home and we're trying to take care of each other, so I don't mind. It's definitely different than before, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. So 100% right, and I'm definitely coming from a fan, a consumer perspective. I'm not in the industry, I don't work for PlayStation, you know what I'm saying? So definitely my perspective is from a fan and consumer thing. I definitely agree with what he's saying for the most part here, right? Like, I do feel that there was, and you kind of allude to this, where like there was a little bit of a misstep in terms of the Mark Cerny, you know, the Road to PlayStation 5 stream and stuff like that. So I watched it, and overall, like, you know, looking back on it now, I still definitely enjoyed watching it, because there was a lot of really cool things that were announced, you know, at that event, and there's like a lot of really cool in-depth talks, you know, about the PlayStation 5 hardware and how it's going to change gaming as a whole, right? So there's a lot good there, but I do feel like as a player and as a consumer, you know, it wasn't really the most entertaining thing in the world, right? Like, I could definitely see where they kind of missed out on that point. But although, like, I get where he was coming from, and to be fair, right, like, he is speaking completely off of opinion. He's not saying anything as like a demand or as a factual statement, right? Like, as a declaration. He's totally not coming from that angle. I do understand that, but I do kind of disagree with the notion of him like wanting to see things get announced closer to launch, right? Because I do agree with that, you know, mantra if we're talking about a game, right? Like famously Fallout 4, you know what I'm saying? Like Fallout 4, I believe, was on to E3 and came out in November, so a very quick turnaround in terms of that announcement and for that game in particular. And I do like when games get announced, you know, and then there's out really soon after that, right? But I think it's a little bit different when we're talking about a console, right? Like, I think, and of course to add on to it, especially with the times that we're in right now, right? Like, I don't think it's gonna go necessarily well if, you know, you want to announce a console, you know, like super quickly from release, right? Like, I feel like that's probably gonna be the wrong thing to do, right? Like, it's gonna be difficult. Like, it's easy to convince someone, hey, in 3 months you can play this game that costs $60, right? I think it's a lot different when you're saying like, hey, you know, you can buy X console with all these games and, you know, whatever else you're gonna need to play this console, mainly just the games and the console, to be fair. But like that, you know, let's say you want to get, you know, 3 games at launch, we're talking $120 on top of the price of the PS5, which is allegedly $500. So we're talking about $600 and like what, $50 after tax, maybe even more than that. And that is a little bit of a tougher ask on a short whim notice as opposed to a game, you know what I'm saying? But I do get where he's coming from in terms of like hype. Like, it is cool to like hear that, oh, we're gonna hear about PS5 and it's pretty soon, you know what I'm saying? But I think from a buyer's perspective, I think you would want to give them the most time possible to make that decision on buying that console, you know what I'm saying? But that's just where I'm kind of coming from that point. But I do you know, see his point and do see that in terms of hype, it could be really cool. But I guess that's all we got here for this video, guys. Let me know in the comments below, what are your thoughts on, of course, a, you know, compelling lineup of games coming up pretty soon, as well as those thoughts about Adam Boyes and how he feels about the shift in different change and how they're rolling out info for the PS5. And make sure also, while you are down there, to check out our description where you can find our Twitter, our Discord, as well as our Anchor link. That way you can listen to a lot from content and podcast format. That, of course, we can road to part 2, as well as Save Slot Podcast. And down below, make sure to leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it, as well as stay subscribed to PlayStation Source to keep up with the latest and greatest in PlayStation. Thank you for watching, and as always, greatness awaits.